Daniel appeared seemingly out of nowhere after being gone for 8 full years, and he had a pregnant woman with him. He glanced at me, his expression casual, almost indifferent, and said, "Olivia, let's get divorced." What he didn't realize was that 3 years ago, a court had officially declared him legally dead. His father had passed away since then, leaving his entire estate to my daughter Chloe. As her legal guardian, I was now managing the family company, and I had already remarried. Seeing him standing at my front door was a shock. I think I just stood there, stunned, for a full minute. Daniel, missing for 8 years, had his back to me initially, looking like he was trying to figure out the door lock. The woman beside him, clearly pregnant, noticed me first and quickly tugged on his sleeve to get his attention. Daniel turned his head, said something to her with a smile, and listened as she whispered a reminder. Then, he turned fully around. The instant our eyes met, the brief warmth I thought I saw vanished, replaced by a cold indifference. Neither of us spoke for a moment. The silence felt heavy, charged with unspoken history and tension. Daniel broke the silence first, and surprisingly, his tone was questioning, almost accusatory. "Olivia, why did you change the password?" The house password had always been our wedding anniversary. I took a moment to really look at him. 8 years had passed. He looked older, more mature in some ways, but there was still a familiar hint of arrogant carelessness in his eyes. He was still handsome, but his skin looked rougher, more weathered than I remembered. And his clothes, which didn't seem particularly expensive, didn't fit him quite right. It was clear he hadn't been living a life of luxury. The woman beside him timidly tugged on Daniel's sleeve again. He took her hand reassuringly, a gesture clearly meant to comfort her. He played the part of the mature, handsome man, while she looked like the innocent, delicate woman needing protection. It seemed like a fitting pair. If I had been the kind of woman who had faithfully waited 8 long years for her husband's return, seeing them together like this would have surely broken my heart. Fortunately for me, I wasn't that woman. This house had originally belonged to Daniel, that much was true. I frowned slightly at his proprietary tone, but stepped forward nonetheless. I entered the new password, opening the door. Daniel watched my fingers move across the keypad, his own frown deepening. 210909, he murmured. "What date is that?" Of course he wouldn't know. It was the date of my second wedding to my current husband, Michael. Daniel and I had entered into what was essentially a business marriage. Our families were close, we had known each other since childhood, and he was only a few months older than me. When we were both 22, following the arrangements made by our parents, we obtained our marriage certificate and had a large, formal wedding. A year after that, I became pregnant. But before our child was born, Daniel disappeared without a trace. Walking back into the house he once considered his marital home after 8 years away, Daniel seemed momentarily disoriented. As his eyes scanned the interior, his frown returned immediately. "Why is it so messy in here?" he demanded. "Don't you even have a maid anymore? Olivia, is this how you manage the house when I'm not around? And where's the kid? He should be home from school by now. Why aren't you picking him up?" His completely unwarranted assumptions and demanding tone made me want to laugh. Meanwhile, the woman with him, Isabel, seemed quite taken with the house, rushing inside and looking around as if she already owned the place. "Mr. Davies," I said, leaning casually against the doorframe, my voice deliberately calm. "Do you even know if the child you fathered is a boy or a girl?" He glanced towards Isabel, his expression softening slightly. "Boy or girl, it doesn't matter. I like children either way." I almost laughed out loud in frustration. "I mean our child, Daniel, the one I gave birth to after you disappeared." He looked momentarily confused, then regained his composure, speaking with an air of self-righteousness. "Look, you can certainly afford to raise 2 children. Why are you still holding a grudge against me? Isabel here," he gestured towards her, "naturally loves kids and will take excellent care of him. Unlike you, always so focused on business, so cold-hearted." This time, I did laugh out loud. "Daniel, do you have any idea that, legally speaking, you're already considered deceased?" His face changed instantly. "Olivia, I understand you're upset that it took me so long to come back, but you can't just say things like that." Isabel immediately jumped in to defend him. "I know you must resent him, Olivia, but Daniel has suffered a great deal over these past years. You can't treat him this way, no matter how angry you are." Without saying another word, I opened the photo gallery on my phone and showed him a picture I had saved. It was a copy of his official death certificate. You need to understand the situation clearly, Daniel. You died legally 3 years ago. The stark black words on the white background of the certificate made Daniel's pupils visibly contract. But he recovered quickly, insisting stubbornly, "Olivia, what kind of stunt are you pulling? Stop throwing a tantrum." My laughter became more genuine this time. I then turned my attention to the woman clinging to Daniel's arm, who was now glaring at me defiantly. "Daniel, who is this?" He seemed taken aback for a second, then turned to look down at Isabel. The icy impatience he had shown me melted away, replaced by a look of genuine warmth and affection. He gazed at her lovingly as he spoke to me. "Olivia, that was a mistake from the start. Meeting Isabel made me realize that I never truly loved you. Isabel is the one I truly love." I cut him off, my patience wearing thin. "I was just asking for her name." The woman spoke softly, her voice gentle. "My name is Isabel." I nodded slowly. "And you're pregnant?" Isabel's eyes immediately filled with tears. "I know this must be very difficult for you to accept," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Daniel and I having a baby together. But we are genuinely in love." "Olivia," she looked at me earnestly, "the one who isn't loved is the outsider. Our child will be born into a family filled with love." I listened without expression, then asked pointedly, "So, are you suggesting that the child Daniel and I conceived was somehow forced upon him?" "Daniel, I never realized your heart could be so cold, especially considering you were apparently involved enough with me to conceive a child back then. It's quite unsettling, really." Daniel's face flushed a deep red. He quickly turned to comfort Isabel. "Isabel, don't listen to her nonsense. I didn't understand what real love was until I met you." "Isabel, I only love you. Everything I have belongs to you and our child. You have to trust me." Isabel collapsed into his arms, sobbing dramatically. They held onto each other tightly, lost in their own world, as if no one else existed. Feeling like the distinctly unwanted third party in this emotional display, I let out an ill-timed chuckle. Daniel glared at me, demanding, "Olivia, Isabel is pregnant. She's crying her eyes out, and you can actually stand there and laugh." I feigned surprise. Why shouldn't I laugh? It's not as if I was the one who got Isabel pregnant. I paused, then turned to Isabel with a look of mock sincerity. "Oh, by the way, Miss Isabel, I honestly think you should keep a very close eye on Daniel. You see, when I was 8 months pregnant with his child, he simply vanished without a word. We all thought he was dead. And now, 8 years later, here he is. It makes me wonder," I mused thoughtfully. "Does he see himself as some kind of rooster, just scattering his seed and moving on to the next henhouse?" Isabel instinctively looked up at Daniel, a flicker of doubt in her tear-filled eyes. He quickly tried to reassure her. "Don't believe a word she says." Then he turned his fury back on me, shouting, "Olivia, you malicious woman. You just can't stand to see Isabel and me happy together, can you?" I leaned back against the doorframe nonchalantly. "Well, of course not. What wife enjoys watching her husband parade his pregnant mistress around right under her nose?" "Amy," Daniel yelled, reverting to my old name in his anger. "I never knew you could be so venomous." "What mistress? Isabel is the woman who should have been my wife all along. Let me make this clear. I came back here today to divorce you." "Well," I replied calmly, "you came back for nothing." I raised my left hand, showing him the large diamond ring on my ring finger. "Legally, Daniel, once a person is declared dead, their marriage is automatically dissolved. The surviving spouse is free to remarry. So, you see, there's no need for a divorce." Daniel looked genuinely taken aback, disappointment clouding his features. "Olivia, how did you become like this? Why are you showing me some fake ring? It doesn't change anything. The only person I love is Isabel." I felt a pang of disappointment myself, though not for the reason he thought. "After all these years, Daniel, you really haven't changed at all. You still never seem to understand what people are actually telling you." Just then, the sound of car brakes, screeching sharply outside, broke the tension. Running towards the house were not just Mr. Harrison, the lawyer I had called and expected, but also my current husband, Michael. Michael rushed straight to me, pulling me into a hug and quickly checking me over. "Are you all right?" he asked urgently. "Did this jerk try to hurt you?" Daniel looked completely shocked, his gaze darting between Michael and me. Then, his expression shifted to something close to anger. "Oh, Olivia! Is this Michael? When did you two get together?" Did he honestly believe I had been pining for him, waiting faithfully all these years? "Show some respect, Daniel," Michael said firmly, hugging me tighter. "We are legally married." He lifted my left hand, holding it alongside his own. Our wedding rings were a perfectly matching set. Daniel looked devastated, his eyes turning red. "No way," he muttered, shaking his head. "How could you be so heartless?" Suddenly, he seemed to remember something important and asked anxiously, "What about my son?" "Olivia, you didn't give my son his last name, did you? Tell me you didn't." I couldn't help but sneer slightly. "What on earth are you talking about?" Daniel breathed a visible sigh of relief, assuming I meant I hadn't changed the name. "Of course," I continued smoothly. "Our child has my last name." Daniel froze, stunned. Isabel timidly spoke up. "Olivia, how could you be so inconsiderate? Giving the child your last name? That reflects poorly on Daniel. It makes him lose face." I laughed curtly. Why should the child I gave birth to, the child I raised, carry Daniel's last name? Isabel retorted, "That's just not right. Daniel is the man. Without him, you couldn't have had a child in the first place." I scoffed. "There are plenty of men in the world, Isabel. I certainly don't need just one particular man like Daniel to have a child." Daniel looked absolutely furious. "You worthless woman! I can't believe I never saw how promiscuous you really are." Calmly, I replied, "And I figured out long ago that you're about as sharp as a sack of hammers, Daniel." Michael couldn't resist intervening. "Chloe is a girl," he stated simply. "A very sweet, well-behaved little girl." Hearing this, Daniel seemed to relax slightly. With an air of forced magnanimity, he said, "Well, it's not such a big deal if a girl takes her mother's last name, I suppose. But Olivia," he continued, getting back to what truly mattered to him, "the family business still needs a son to inherit it. If you're really that upset about everything, maybe we don't have to get a divorce after all. Isabel is likely carrying a boy. We can register his name under yours officially and designate him as the heir to the company." Isabel turned pale, letting out a small shriek. "Daniel, what are you saying?" Daniel shot her a stern glance. "Isabel, just listen to me." Michael and I exchanged a quick look, both struggling to keep straight faces. Did Daniel honestly still think any of this was up for negotiation? After a long, awkward pause, Mr. Harrison, the lawyer, cleared his throat. "Olivia, may I proceed?" Daniel recognized Mr. Harrison, who had been the company's lawyer for many years, and seemed to relax slightly, perhaps assuming the lawyer was there for him. He turned to me. "Why is Harrison here?" "Olivia, I already said let's compromise. I won't divorce you, just change our daughter's last name back to Davies." With utmost professional courtesy, Mr. Harrison responded, "Mr. Davies, I believe you misunderstand the situation. Olivia did not call me here regarding a divorce. My purpose here today is primarily to initiate the process of revoking your legal declaration of death. Furthermore," he added, his tone grave, "there are matters concerning the return of your assets from your designated inheritors that need to be addressed." Silence descended upon the room. Daniel's eyes widened, filled with a dawning sense of helplessness and confusion. He finally exploded, shouting, "What are you all talking about? Declared dead? My parents would never agree to that. Where's my dad? Give me a phone. I need to call my dad right now," Mr. Harrison replied, still maintaining his polite demeanor. "Mr. Davies, your father passed away 3 years ago. After Daniel vanished 8 years ago, I immediately contacted the police. He had supposedly left for work that morning as usual, but when his assistant called me later, concerned that he hadn't arrived at the office, I knew something was wrong. His assistant and I spent hours frantically searching all the places he might have gone, contacting every relative and friend we could think of, but there was no sign of him anywhere. When Daniel first went missing, my initial fear was kidnapping. His parents and I waited in agonizing suspense for a ransom call, but none ever came. Eventually, we had no choice but to file a missing person report with the police. They meticulously checked all the security footage from cameras near our home and along his usual route to work. Once Daniel's car left our gated community that morning, it simply disappeared from all subsequent camera feeds. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. A month after his disappearance, we offered a substantial reward for any information leading to his whereabouts. The large sum attracted significant public attention, even making headlines online several times, but unfortunately it yielded no useful leads. At the time Daniel disappeared, I was 8 months pregnant, but still actively involved in work. Following this incident, Daniel's parents insisted I stop working immediately and focus on my health and the upcoming birth. They were clearly preparing for the worst-case scenario and began channeling all their hopes towards the grandchild I was carrying, potentially their only link to Daniel. Daniel's father, who had been semi-retired, had to return to the company full-time to regain control and manage the workload Daniel had abruptly abandoned. The thought of terminating the pregnancy never crossed my mind. At 8 months, it wouldn't have been feasible anyway. Given the complex relationship and business ties between our families, having a child served as a crucial link, regardless of Daniel's presence. More importantly, though, I found myself looking forward to having the child. It wasn't just Daniel's family company that needed an heir. My family's interests were also tied to this child. From the day Daniel and I married, it was implicitly understood that our offspring would eventually inherit assets and responsibilities from both sides. Ultimately, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. By that point, Daniel's parents no longer cared whether it was a boy or a girl. They were simply overjoyed to have a grandchild. Gazing lovingly at her tiny face, they named her Chloe. I didn't object at the time. The news of his father's death finally seemed to break through Daniel's denial. He stumbled out of the house, pulling Mr. Harrison with him, demanding to be taken to his father's grave. He collapsed there, crying uncontrollably. We followed at a distance. Daniel's mother, having been alerted to his return, rushed over and stood watching him from nearby, her eyes red and filled with complex emotions. "Mom!" Daniel cried, seeming to finally grasp the depth of his actions. He clung to his mother's legs, sobbing bitterly. Isabel hovered nearby, looking extremely uncomfortable witnessing this raw display of grief and regret. Michael and I stood further back, holding hands quietly. Michael leaned close and whispered, "Chloe wanted to come see her biological father, but I told her no." I glanced at him. "Jealous?" Michael just gave me a look. "I just didn't want her to get scared," he muttered. "Daniel used to lose his temper quite badly." I didn't respond, just gave him a knowing look. After the initial storm of tears subsided, Daniel's mother grabbed him by the collar, her own tears streaming down her face as she questioned him fiercely. "So, Daniel, where exactly have you been all these years?" Daniel's crying stopped abruptly. He looked away, clearly finding it difficult to explain. "Mom, please, don't ask." "Of course I'll ask," his mother retorted, her grief turning to anger. She pulled him forcefully up from the ground. "You disappeared for 8 years. 8! You don't look like you've been injured in some accident. Why didn't you send us a single message, not one word? If it wasn't for your father finally deciding he couldn't let Olivia waste her life waiting indefinitely, how do you think she would feel seeing you show up now with a pregnant woman on your arm?" Daniel weakly tried to defend himself. "But she remarried anyway. She wasn't really waiting for me. His mother silenced him with a sharp slap across the face. Mr. Harrison discreetly whispered to me, "The assets are prepared and ready to be legally returned to Daniel at any time." I nodded. I had always considered the possibility of Daniel's return. I had managed his assets separately from everything else, and in the 8 years he was gone, their value had significantly increased, nearly doubling. Since a portion of those assets legally belonged to my daughter as his heir, it was crucial to handle the transfer properly. Daniel's mother, trembling with rage, shouted at him, "What right do you have to say she didn't wait? She took care of your father and me, raised your child alone for 8 long years. And you? You didn't even bother to show up for your own father's funeral. It was Olivia who arranged everything, who handled everything. Where the hell were you, Daniel?" Daniel stammered, unable to form a coherent answer. Finally, Isabel couldn't stay silent any longer. She rushed forward, knelt dramatically before Daniel's mother, and bowed her head low. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "It's my fault. Daniel he actually took me abroad." Slowly, piece by piece, the full story of Daniel's disappearance emerged from their disjointed explanations. 8 years ago, while I was heavily pregnant, Daniel had met Isabel. He was apparently captivated by her perceived kindness and vulnerability. They quickly became involved. Daniel knew that neither his family nor mine would ever approve of him divorcing me, especially under the circumstances. Coincidentally, his company was facing some significant challenges at the time, and he claimed the immense pressure of work was becoming unbearable. He also found my changing pregnant body and occasional irritability off-putting. After considering his options, Daniel secretly began transferring substantial amounts of money and assets overseas. He and Isabel then meticulously planned his disappearance, carefully avoiding surveillance cameras, disposing of his phone and anything else that could track his location, and finally leaving in a prearranged, untraceable van. To ensure he couldn't be easily followed, Daniel chose to leave the country illegally, sneaking across borders while Isabel flew out using her passport on a tourist visa. After months of travel and evasion, Daniel finally reached the country where Isabel was waiting. They lived there in relative hiding to avoid discovery and evade his family responsibilities. However, with the money Daniel had transferred, their life was initially quite comfortable, and their relationship apparently flourished. This continued until about a year ago when their funds began to run out. They were forced to find work to support themselves. Then, recently, despite their attempts at contraception, Isabel discovered she was pregnant. Unwilling to raise their child, the supposed product of their true love, in less than comfortable circumstances, Daniel decided to return. He seemed to believe that showing up with a child would somehow force me to grant him a divorce and perhaps give him leverage to reclaim his family's wealth. So they bought plane tickets and flew back home. Daniel's mother listened to this account, trembling with fury. "So," she finally screamed, her voice shaking, "you abandoned your elderly parents, abandoned your pregnant wife, all because of this woman and your so-called stress? You worthless, unfilial disgrace." Daniel couldn't even lift his head, weakly mumbling, "Olivia only had a girl anyway. It's useless for the inheritance." "Mom, Isabel is definitely having a boy. I'll marry Isabel, we'll have the child, I'll come back to the company. I promise I'll work hard this time, I'll run the company properly. You can stay home and help Isabel take care of the baby." "Shut up," his mother interrupted violently. "We only acknowledge one grandchild, and that is Chloe. This woman," she gestured contemptuously towards Isabel, "is not part of my family." Daniel seemed to dismiss her words as mere anger. I caught Mr. Harrison's eye and gave him a subtle nod. He understood immediately and stepped forward, presenting Daniel with a list of assets. "Mr. Davies, please review this. This is the current list of assets legally belonging to you that are due to be returned." Daniel eagerly snatched the document, turning to Isabel with a reassuring smile. "See, don't worry, Isabel. I told you I can support you and the baby." But as he read through the list, his smile gradually faded, replaced by a look of confusion, then dismay. "Is this all?" he demanded, looking up sharply. "Where are the Lynn Corporation shares? Didn't my dad leave me anything?" He turned angrily towards me. "Olivia, did you somehow take the shares my dad left me?" I smiled coolly at him. "Mr. Davies, perhaps you need to grasp the reality of the situation. You are legally a dead man. How exactly could your father leave company shares to someone who was deceased?" In the 5th year after Daniel's disappearance, his father became seriously ill. Daniel had left behind a significant mess at the company. Although his father had initially asked for my help, he remained cautious and tried to manage everything himself. The stress and workload took a heavy toll, and his health rapidly declined. With Daniel officially missing and presumed dead, distributing his assets became incredibly complex. Many outside parties began eyeing the Lynn family assets, sensing vulnerability. Faced with this situation and his own failing health, Daniel's father made a difficult decision. He spent his last months meticulously arranging for his son Daniel to be legally declared dead by the courts. After extensive legal coordination, this was achieved. Daniel's personal assets at the time were then legally divided into four parts. Portions went to his parents, a portion to me as his surviving spouse, and a portion to our daughter Chloe as his heir. After ensuring this was legally finalized, Daniel's father wrote his will and passed away, filled with regret over his son's actions. In his will, he left his entire remaining estate, including his substantial block of company shares, directly to his granddaughter Chloe, designating Daniel's mother as her legal guardian until she came of age. Daniel's mother, however, had little interest or aptitude for business matters, so the practical control of everything, including the assets inherited by Chloe and Daniel's mother's portion, effectively fell to me. Daniel's original assets, which were now legally his again upon the revocation of his death certificate, consisted mostly of real estate and cash. A considerable sum in the billions, but containing very few company shares, as his father hadn't legally transferred them to him before his disappearance. I always suspected Daniel's father secretly hoped Daniel was still alive somewhere, but circumstances forced him to make the choices he did to protect the family's legacy. According to the law, now that Daniel had returned, his original personal assets were rightfully his again. However, his father's assets, including the company's shares, were already legally Chloe's property. Daniel couldn't touch them. Since Chloe had always lived with me and I had full legal guardianship, even with Daniel's return, custody was almost certain to remain with me. This was why I hadn't refused Daniel entry into our former marital home. Legally, it was part of his original assets. Not long after Daniel's father passed away, I legally changed my daughter's last name to my own. Daniel's mother, always sensible and understanding of the situation, raised no objections. She continued to live her life comfortably, traveling and enjoying her retirement, happily accepting the substantial monthly support payments I arranged for her from the estate funds. My daughter grew quite fond of her straightforward grandmother, and the three of us developed a pleasant relationship. While some outsiders might have harbored suspicions about my role in everything, I had consistently played the part of the wronged, abandoned wife perfectly. The police investigations found no inconsistencies in my account, and my former in-laws, knowing my character, never doubted my integrity. Daniel looked like he was losing his mind. "What does a little girl need company shares for?" he yelled towards his father's grave. "Dad, were you completely out of your mind?" He looked like he was about to start crying again, but his mother stopped him coldly. "He's dead, Daniel. Who are you putting on a show for now?" "Mom, I didn't know Dad died. I swear, I really didn't know." "And what difference would it have made if you did know?" his mother scoffed. "Would you have rushed back from wherever you were hiding, across thousands of miles just to fight for the inheritance?" Any lingering pity she might have felt for her son seemed to evaporate completely once she learned the full truth behind his 8-year absence. Daniel looked at his mother pleadingly, his eyes red. "Mom, I'm your son. Can't you show me any compassion?" His mother laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. Daniel's eyes briefly lit up with false hope, but she continued, "You know perfectly well whether you care more about your father or his money. When you ran off, your father and I were already 60 years old. We didn't have many years left. You dumped everything on us, didn't give a damn about our responsibilities, and just left without a care in the world. You didn't care whether we lived or died. Why should we care about you now?" She looked at him with undisguised disgust. "As a son, you are unfilial. As a husband, you are heartless and cruel. As a father, you are utterly inhuman. My only regret," she finished, her voice trembling with emotion, "is giving birth to someone like you." Daniel looked as though he'd been struck by lightning. Isabel continued to cry and bow her head, murmuring, "Auntie, please don't say that about Daniel, and it's all my fault. Blame me." Mr. Harrison, who had been listening quietly, leaned towards me again and whispered, "Technically, Mr. Davies could be facing charges for bigamy, given his marriage status wasn't legally dissolved before his relationship with Isabel, not to mention potential charges related to illegal immigration and the initial transfer of funds. However," he paused, "I assume you don't actually wish to see him incarcerated at this point?" I nodded slightly. "There isn't enough concrete evidence for serious charges yet," I murmured back. "Take your time gathering what you can. For now, let's focus on revoking the death declaration and finalizing the asset transfer. Let these two star-crossed lovers officially get married. Let them have a few days of supposed happiness. I added, oh, and Mr. Harrison, don't forget to deduct my standard asset management fees for the past 8 years as well as accumulated child support for Chloe from the funds being returned to him. Michael, overhearing this exchange, squeezed my hand, a grin spreading across his face. I love it when you're calculating, he whispered. Predictably, Daniel soon started trying to approach me again. Compared to the vast wealth controlled by Chloe, and, by extension, me, the assets returned to him seemed pitifully small. He appeared to be considering his options, either trying to win me back and remarry me, or attempting to fight for custody of Chloe, likely viewing either path as a way to regain access to the larger family fortune. The next day, as I arrived to pick up Chloe from school, I saw Daniel waiting near the gate. When he saw me, his expression was conflicted, but he eventually swallowed his pride and approached me. Olivia, he began, I'm sorry about everything. I responded with a non-committal, slightly bored sound. Encouraged, Daniel pressed on. I asked around, you and Michael don't have any other children yet, do you? Look, I won't hold a grudge against you for everything that happened. Chloe needs her father. Divorce Michael, Olivia. We can get married again. I raised an eyebrow, smiling faintly. And what about Isabel? Seeing my smile, Daniel seemed to think he was making progress. He quickly said, like I mentioned, we can register her child under your name legally. I promise I won't let her bother you or Chloe. Inheritance, it really should go to a boy. Once we transfer Chloe's shares to me, eventually our combined estate will go to our son. The little brother will definitely take good care of his older sister. I grinned openly now. Daniel, your audacity is truly astonishing. It must stretch wide enough to wrap around the entire planet. He looked stunned by my response. Just then, I waved to a young girl walking towards us from the school building. Daniel, perhaps thinking this was Chloe, quickly turned around, his expression eager, desperate to make a good impression. Chloe, is that you? Cindy? He called out, using her given name. I'm your dad. You must have missed me so much, right? As he moved to embrace her, the girl quickly stepped back, looking confused. Daniel, assuming she was just shy, said patiently, Cindy, don't be afraid. I'm your dad. I spoke from behind him, my voice calm. Maya, where's Chloe today? Daniel froze mid-movement. Maya, quickly dodging around him, ran towards me. Chloe's on cleanup duty today, Aunt Olivia. She'll be out in a few minutes. She then looked curiously at Daniel. Isn't Chloe's dad Uncle Michael? When Daniel disappeared, Maya was only a baby, so she naturally didn't recognize him. In her memory, Chloe only gained a father figure when she was 5 years old. Michael. Daniel forced a strained smile. Olivia, Don't call me that, I said dismissively without looking up from stuffing a bill into Maya's hand. Maya, did this strange man scare you? Go buy yourself a treat to feel better. We'll head home as soon as Chloe comes out. Chloe and Maya were classmates, and my cousins and I often shared pickup duties for convenience. Since I had meetings that morning, my cousin had dropped them off, but it was my turn for afternoon pickup. Daniel murmured awkwardly, Sorry, I haven't actually met Chloe yet. I interrupted coolly. Chloe doesn't know you. And frankly, she only needs one dad, my husband Michael. Daniel looked furious. Olivia, you need to show some basic respect. Chloe just hasn't met me properly. Once she does, she'll adore me. I'm her real father. I couldn't be bothered to argue with him. Maya ran back quickly, holding 2 large sticks of cotton candy. She handed one to me along with the change. This one's for Chloe, she explained. Daniel, seeing an opportunity to connect, asked, Oh, Cindy likes cotton candy? Maya shook her head as she opened the car door and climbed inside, happily taking a large bite of her own cotton candy. Nope. But at our house, we always buy 2 of everything. One for me and one for Chloe. Chloe doesn't like cotton candy, so she always gives hers to me. That way, I get 2. Maya was technically older than Chloe by a few months, but Chloe always seemed more mature. Standing together, Chloe often looked like the older sister. I smiled and ruffled Maya's hair. Our Maya is certainly clever. Finally, Chloe emerged from the school building. The moment Daniel saw her, he stopped talking. visibly stunned. Chloe was indeed a remarkable child. She seemed to have perfectly inherited the best features from both Daniel and me. She possessed a striking appearance and carried herself with a calm, composed demeanor that made her stand out among the other children her age. She was, after all, the designated future successor to two significant family fortunes. I felt a surge of maternal pride. Daniel recognized her instantly, stammering, This is Cindy. Chloe, right?" I ignored him. Chloe saw Daniel standing there, paused for just a moment, then walked calmly over to me and handed me her backpack. She then turned to Daniel and asked, politely but with a distinct emotional distance, "Are you my biological father?" Daniel looked extremely nervous, fidgeting and unsure where to put his hands. You know about me?" Chloe replied politely, "Seeing is believing, they say." Daniel's face lit up with hope, only to fall again as Chloe continued smoothly. "But frankly, seeing you in person is rather worse than just hearing about you." Daniel was immediately flustered. "Did your mom tell you bad things about me, Cindy, Chloe? Don't just listen to everything your mom says. You don't know the whole story." Chloe interrupted him calmly. "I heard," she stated, her voice even, "that you want my mother to give your company shares and her company shares to you and the child of another woman." She finished speaking and looked directly at Daniel, a faint, unreadable smile on her young face. Under her clear, unwavering gaze, Daniel seemed to squirm, perhaps feeling a flicker of guilt. He quickly tried to recover. "Well, girls should be pampered and taken care of. I just want to make life easier for you, Chloe. Leave all the difficult, messy business stuff to your brother." Chloe tilted her head slightly, considering his words. "I don't particularly want to manage the company myself anyway," she replied thoughtfully. "We can always hire professional managers. There are people who can help run things. Why would I need to give my assets away to some outsider?" Daniel feebly argued, "How is your brother an outsider?" Chloe answered firmly, her voice gaining a slight edge. "Because I have no intention of acknowledging you as my father." Daniel looked completely dumbfounded, speechless. Chloe continued, her smile still in place, though it now seemed tinged with pity. "Honestly, I'm ashamed to have your blood running in my veins. I had only heard stories before, and I didn't entirely believe them. But seeing you today, my biological father truly is a foolish and shameless person." With that, she opened the car door, slid inside, and said clearly, "Let's go home, Mom." After a moment of silence inside the car, she turned back, a look of confusion on her face as she saw Maya and me doubled over, holding our cotton candies, laughing so hard we could barely breathe. Maya suddenly realized, letting out a mock scream, "Auntie, why did you eat Chloe's cotton candy?" "Why not?" A few months later, I received a wedding invitation for Daniel and Isabel. It seemed Daniel had finally accepted that there was no hope of reconciling with me, nor could he realistically win a custody battle for Chloe. So, in the end, he and Isabel decided to make their union official. Naturally, I didn't attend. Why would I grace such an event with my presence? I heard from mutual acquaintances that the wedding was a very simple, almost sad affair. Isabel, apparently an orphan with no family connections, had no guests, and Daniel's mother flatly refused to attend. After Daniel's 8-year absence and the scandalous nature of his return, he had effectively been ostracized from our social circle. The few people who received invitations and knew the real story were reportedly disgusted. In the end, they barely managed to fill a single table with guests. The wedding host apparently commented later that it was the most sparsely attended wedding he had ever officiated, and he struggled to maintain a professional smile throughout the ceremony. Daniel exchanged rings with Isabel, looking sullen and defeated. After the wedding, Daniel made some attempts to secure a position within the Lynn Corporation, but after 8 years away, the landscape had changed dramatically. He found no support among the current executives or board members. He pleaded with his mother, who promptly kicked him out of her house. He tried approaching me, but I simply had Chloe convey a few choice words that sent him away humiliated. Desperate, he even resorted to confronting Michael. That night, Michael came to me looking unusually downcast. "Your ex-husband cornered me today," he said, sounding somewhat pitiful. "He was making threats." I patted his head reassuringly, a small smile playing on my lips. My marriage to Michael had begun as a purely transactional arrangement. The circumstances surrounding Daniel's disappearance had always felt suspicious to me. I worried that if his death declaration was ever revoked, our original marriage might technically be reinstated, meaning I would have to go through the unpleasant process of divorcing Daniel all over again. To safeguard against this, I needed to remarry quickly. Feelings weren't a primary consideration. After careful thought, I chose Michael. His own family situation was complicated. His father favored an illegitimate child, making him amenable to a mutually beneficial arrangement. We negotiated terms like a business deal. I would use my influence and resources to help Michael consolidate power within his own family's company, and in return, he would fulfill the role of my husband, providing stability and legitimacy. Key conditions included no infidelity, no pressure for me to have a second child, and if Michael desired children of his own, he would have to wait 10 years. After 10 years, assuming Daniel hadn't reappeared, we would amicably divorce. Michael, being intelligent and pragmatic, understood the potential social awkwardness of marrying a woman with a child under such circumstances, but readily agreed to the terms. Despite the businesslike nature of our union, however, it seemed he had developed genuine feelings along the way. A few days later, while I was in my office, I received a call from Maya's mother, who worked at the company's front desk. "Olivia," she said, sounding flustered, "there's a pregnant woman kneeling at the main entrance. She's asking to see you, says her name is Isabel. I tried asking her to come inside, but she refused. Now there's quite a crowd gathering outside." I chuckled softly. So, Daniel had actually sent Isabel out to make a public spectacle. I could already imagine the online gossip channels having a field day. But seriously, did they think such tactics would work on me? "Call the police immediately," I instructed calmly. "Report her for attempting extortion and causing a public disturbance. Handle it efficiently, and I'll authorize a personal bonus for you from my account at the end of the month." Her voice immediately filled with excitement. "Understood. Thank you, Olivia." A few hours later, my executive assistant brought Maya's mother up to my office. It was her first time reporting directly to me, and she was practically vibrating with excitement as she recounted the entire incident involving Isabel. The police had arrived promptly. As soon as Isabel saw the officers, she became visibly nervous. Her past experiences avoiding authorities abroad likely kicking in, and instinctively stood up as if preparing to flee. The receptionist reacted quickly, grabbing her arm and escorting her firmly towards the police car, maintaining a bright smile while preventing her escape. Apparently, Isabel stammered incoherently for a long time, unable to provide a clear reason for why she'd been kneeling at the company entrance. Eventually, the police contacted Daniel. Based on their combined, likely chaotic explanations, the police pieced together the situation. Since Isabel was heavily pregnant, the police couldn't take significant action beyond giving her a stern warning before sending her away. After this failed attempt, I was confident Isabel wouldn't dare try such a stunt again. I was pleased with the receptionist's handling of the situation and made sure she received a generous bonus at the end of the month, as promised. I heard later that she was so thrilled when she received the bonus notification that she nearly fainted and immediately treated her colleagues to a celebratory dinner after work. Some news outlets cautiously posted brief articles online about a pregnant woman kneeling outside the Lynn Corporation headquarters, but the story failed to gain any traction or generate significant public interest. Daniel tried various other methods to get in touch with me, but none succeeded. As I'd thought before, who did he think he was, expecting an audience with me? I co-owned and managed two major family enterprises. My time was valuable, not available to just anyone on demand. Daniel then resorted to his old tactic of trying to intercept me at Chloe's school gate. However, he didn't seem to realize that due to my increasingly demanding work schedule, Michael had taken over most of the school pickup duties. Apparently, Michael and Daniel nearly came to blows during one encounter. Chloe ended up sternly scolding both of them, and Daniel, thoroughly chastised by his own daughter, never dared to show up at the school again. Hearing this account from Michael later, I couldn't help but laugh and shower my precious daughter with affectionate kisses. Chloe only truly let her guard down and showed her more childish side when she was alone with me. She hugged my neck tightly, calling me Mommy affectionately. Michael watched us interact, a warm, gentle smile on his face. Sometime later, I heard through the grapevine that Isabel had given birth. The baby, unexpectedly, was of mixed race with unusually fair skin, making it immediately clear that Daniel could not be the biological father. Daniel was reportedly beside himself with rage. Seeing the baby herself, Isabel was also apparently shocked. Under Daniel's furious questioning, she tearfully admitted to having had a brief affair with her boss while they were living abroad, claiming she mistakenly believed it occurred during a safe part of her cycle. Daniel, in his fury, apparently lunged towards the newborn, almost strangling him, but his mother happened to walk into the hospital room at that exact moment and stopped him with a sharp command. Daniel, completely undone, burst into tears and cried to his mother, "Mom, I was wrong. This woman is a liar, a cheat. I want a divorce." His mother looked at him with undisguised mockery. "Daniel," she said dryly, "isn't this the precious son you were so obsessed with having?" Daniel looked close to a complete breakdown. "No, he's not my child. My only child is Chloe." Calmly, his mother stated, "Chloe wouldn't acknowledge a father like you anyway." "It doesn't matter," Daniel insisted desperately. "She looks so much like me. She's my kid. This one," he glared hatefully at Isabel and the baby, "is the bastard. I'll divorce her. I'll win Olivia back." His mother slapped him hard across the face again. "You don't deserve Olivia." Finally, seeming to grasp the totality of his situation, Daniel collapsed to his knees, crying bitterly. Later, Daniel's mother recounted to me that Isabel clung persistently to Daniel, demanding that he acknowledge the child regardless of paternity. Their intense feelings for each other, which had apparently sustained them through 8 years abroad, disintegrated within months of returning home. They were constantly fighting. Every time Daniel thought about the vast Lynn family fortune he had lost access to, the pain was apparently unbearable. He had previously tolerated Isabel's presence for the sake of the expected male heir, but now that the child clearly wasn't his resentment festered, allegedly escalating into domestic violence. Isabel, though not entirely passive, apparently fought back but, weakened from childbirth, usually lost these altercations. Reportedly terrified of involving the police due to their precarious legal history, she never called for help. Mr. Harrison informed me that Daniel had contacted a lawyer friend and had all his remaining personal assets legally notarized, intending to leave everything solely to Chloe upon his death. He was seen lingering near Chloe's school for several days, but never gathered the courage to actually approach her. Concerned that his erratic behavior might negatively impact Chloe's life, I quietly informed Mr. Harrison that it was time to finalize matters, so not long after that, Daniel was arrested. The evidence gathered regarding his illegal border crossing, the initial fraudulent transfer of assets, and potentially other related offenses was now substantial. Facing the prospect of a lengthy trial and perhaps wanting to avoid confronting the reality of his situation further, he confessed to all charges relatively quickly. With solid evidence and a confession, he was swiftly sentenced. After hearing the news of Daniel's conviction and sentencing, his mother remained silent for a long moment, then sighed deeply. She then turned her attention back to playing with Chloe, who called her Granny sweetly, her face lit up with a bright smile. With Daniel finally out of the picture permanently, I felt a sense of relief and closure. I invited Michael out for a nice dinner to mark the occasion. "We should pick a time soon to finalize the divorce," I said casually, not even looking up as I picked up my chopsticks. Our marriage agreement had served its purpose. It no longer needed to exist. Michael looked stunned. He lowered his head, appearing somewhat dejected. Finally, he said softly, "Okay." I knew he had developed genuine feelings for me, but those feelings were not part of our original agreement, and frankly, they didn't change my plans. Since our finances were never entangled, the divorce process itself was swift and straightforward, though we kept it private for the time being. Chloe knew, of course, but showed no particular reaction to the news. She truly was very much like me in her pragmatism. A few days after the divorce was finalized, I was walking towards my car after work and saw a familiar figure leaning against it. Michael looked up as I approached, his expression cautious. He attempted a nonchalant smile. "Olivia," he said, his voice hopeful. "Can I take you out to dinner tonight?